At first, I felt offended at that and go, no, that's not what I'm, no, that's exactly what I'm doing. I made a mistake trying to write a person of color, writing as a white dude. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today.
First, we wanted to share just a little bit of the progress that we've made on our story. I was able to come up with some plot point ideas this week, and we were discussing those this morning. And a lot of what we were focusing on was some of the threads that we want to run through our whole story. And we knew where we wanted them to be at the beginning, and we knew where we wanted them to be at the end. And the middle we were kind of confused about and didn't have much detail. And we've gotten a little bit better understanding of what that is going to look like now. But we still have a long ways to go into getting it where we want to be. But your work this week was on a very different topic, still important. But how about you share what you've been working on?
Right. I am looking forward to next week when we get to go into the spoiler and see some more of those plot points that you're talking about. But as we were looking at that middle part, one of the areas I wanted to focus was on developing the characters. And I was looking specifically at our second main character. We kind of divided responsibility for characters. And the second main character was my primary responsibility, at least for now. And she happens to be a 16-year-old black girl. And I started to feel just a little bit intimidated. I'm very much not a 16-year-old black girl. And I remember hearing years ago, a criticism about some other author retold to me from a friend of mine, where they had heard somebody say about an author, yeah, well, we can tell that that character is white because you didn't say so. And it's the absence of speaking, that absence of saying anything of significance, that the default is white in your mind. And that was a problem. And having known that just allowing my own brain to say default equals white is a problem. One of the places that I had seen in a Facebook group, somebody was expressing a similar concern, and they were pointed to a website called Writing with Color. And we'll share a link to that in the description. There's no sponsorship or affiliation. It's just a resource that I found helpful. And it's it's a site where they have taken the time to answer a lot of people's questions about what it takes for somebody who is not one thing to write about people who are that thing. Because we could take the saying, write what you know, and I can't remember whose famous quote that is. We could take that too far and just make it very easy and write all of our characters to be white dudes. But that we don't live in a white world, and I think even less so that's going to be true in the future. And this is a future moving book, so we want to write about the diversity that exists and will likely exist in a way that is authentic and respectful.
Right. And like you said, even now, it's not a white world that we're living in. And the most of my childhood, I've grown up in a neighborhood where I was actually a minority. We had people from a lot of different cultures, a very diverse community that I was able to grow up in.
And when you say minority, I think when we moved in, out of the 100 or so homes, there were 2 white families that we were aware of. So just give some context what that means.
So in my neighborhood specifically, I was a minority. And yet I had a bunch of friends, guys around my age, from all sorts of different backgrounds who all got along really well because we had similar interests. We all loved playing basketball, playing football, playing kickball, playing capture the flag. And all these people from all sorts of countries and backgrounds all working together. And that's the world that I'm kind of familiar with, and that's the world that we want to be able to represent, is these people from diverse backgrounds all working together and all as equals, because that's what our world is.
Right. And one of the warnings that they often warn against is people will tend to try to write more generic people where there aren't any characteristics in the character to tell you what culture they belong to. Writers will often feel like, I'm being colorblind. Colorblind is a good thing. I don't see any color. But that's not really the answer either, because what happens is it ends up just becoming white writing. We don't want these characters to just be, even if we were to say, oh, and by the way, this is a black girl, 16-year-old black girl, we don't want to write her as a white girl with black skin either.
Yes. Even in like our neighborhood, we had our similarities, but when I would go over to friends' houses, I would see the cultural differences as well in the way their house was decorated, the types of hospitality that their parents showed, the rules that their parents had for them, the food that was cooking on the stove when I came over to their house. There were all sorts of different things from the different cultures that I would experience. And as teenage boys, one of the ways that we showed our friendship was everybody poking fun at everybody else for their uniquenesses, and not in a way intending to be rude or put down people or anything like that. That's just how teenage boys are. But that's not how we want our novel to be. We're not teenage boys anymore. And one of the things, we would notice our differences, but we wouldn't really learn about those differences or appreciate them or value them. We just noticed them enough to poke fun at each other for them. And we want to have a higher level of understanding in our writing.
And it can make me uncomfortable watching people poke fun at those differences, but even movies and stories that are set around a bunch of white dudes, they will poke fun at, well, we'll call you skinny because you're the fat one, or we'll call you specs because you wear the glasses, or we'll call you whatever. It's just the way they express their friendship. But like you said, that's not how we want to do things in our story. We do want to be able to appreciate the different cultures and the backgrounds that make such a rich place to live with all of that diversity. But finding the answers to what is it about your culture that makes this unique, that makes this distinct. How does your culture approach this? What's the reason for the way that your parents treated you differently? A warning is, a caution is not to expect other people to serve as our educators. Just because you're in that culture doesn't mean that you want the responsibility on your shoulders to educate me about all the different aspects of your culture. And that's where the value of the website that I mentioned, Writing with Color, comes in. They volunteered to do that. They have taken the time, they've invested time to answer a whole bunch of questions, including, for example, one of the areas that they talk a lot about is different types of natural hair, types of hair, what's the word I'm looking for? Texture. And different ways that people care for hair of different texture. And so for this girl, who was one of many babies delivered from a scientific institution into the foster care system, one thing we're exploring is how the strength of her feeling of belonging in a family can be pictured in how that foster family approached the care for her thick curly hair. She's a character, we want to write her as a character that is as authentically black as we know how to write her, but she is not meant to be typical of all 16-year-old black girls. And also importantly, the novel itself is not about what it means to be a 16-year-old black girl. That is not our story to tell. But in the story we do want to tell, we want to portray as much diversity as we know how to in a way that is authentic and respectful.
Right. So in all that you've looked into, where does your mistake that you mentioned at the beginning fall into all that?
Right. Good question. There are some areas that I think we have potential to make mistakes.
Yes.
And one of the really good things about that website is a big, long list of named stereotypes and tropes, such as the black best friend, or the couple that I'm thinking in particular are black person dies first, and the way they worded it was sacrificial Negro. And in those cases, as we explore the hero's journey, one of the things that happens in a hero's journey is that the mentor ends up disappearing or often dying. We don't want to fall into the black person dies first trope, or make the reason that they have to die so that the white character can succeed. That's the sacrificial Negro trope. We want to avoid that as we move forward. Another mistake is just not trying. Just saying, forget this is too hard. There are too many tropes, too many stereotypes. I'm just going to write everybody white and just call them different ethnicities or whatever. But the one that I looked at that pulled me up short, realizing, I did exactly that, was not in this story that we're talking about, but in the saga, or the series that we want to write next. I thought I was being extremely creative, being original. The series is set not in our world, in a completely fictional world. So I figured I can just mix and match some things and put together a character that will feel unique. He ended up being Southeast Asian in most physical characteristics, but then just to make it not exactly that, I said, let's give him some blue eyes. And that's at least a placeholder for now, and we'll move on.
Placeholder.
There we go. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. But I don't remember the exact name for it, but Southeast Asian character with blue or green eyes is one of the tropes and stereotypes that has come up so often, and they have said so much about it that they actually wrote, we are no longer accepting questions about this because we've said everything there is to say, so stop asking questions, thank you very much. Not in so many words, but it was pretty clear that felt like they're getting frustrated because people aren't accepting their answer. And when I first read it, I got a little defensive, going, yeah, but that's not what I'm doing. And the reason that they wrote about it so much was not that it was particularly offensive, but that it was lazy. It was lazy storytelling. So what do you mean it's lazy storytelling? And then as I looked at it, you know what? Their description of you're using eye color to make a difference because you haven't figured out how to write anything interesting that makes a difference. And at first I felt offended at that and go, no, that's exactly what I'm doing. That is exactly why I just said, we'll just make their eyes blue. But that was my mistake. And I almost didn't want to admit it. And that bothers me too.
Yeah.
As we approach this, we've got to be open to accepting that we can make these mistakes, and we need to be ready for the feedback that we get.
Right.
So I guess with all of that, let me invite you to share. Let us know about one of two things. Either a character that you have read that was supposed to be like you, but written by an author that isn't like you. What's an example of one either done surprisingly well or one who was written poorly? Or if you're a writer, tell us about what you learned in the process of writing about a character that is not like you. We'll look for that in the comments, and I think we're going to post another one of these on Tuesday again.
Yes.
Compress things, speed those up. So we will see you again on Tuesday.
See you then.